a dark and tragic film adaptation of Kalevala and its most soul-crushing story. Now that's a movie I would love to enjoy. But largely due to its epic scale being out of scope for Finnish film budgets of a tiny domestic market, we haven't got many epic Kalevala films so far. But now Kalevala, the Story of Kullervo, marketed as Antti J. Jokinen's major motion picture, sets out to fill that void. And after seeing it, I can but wish that the void had remained unfilled. The movie is not without aspects worth praising, as I enjoyed its cinematography and music in particular. The actors also do a fine job with what they have to work with. But along with the laughably bad costumes and set design, which I will talk about towards the end of the video, the film fundamentally fails to adapt Kullervo's story from Kalevala, somehow entirely missing its strong, tragic key themes. The story begins not too differently compared to Lönnrot's creation compilation in Kalevala. In 12th century Karelia, there reside the mighty houses of the brothers Untamo and Kullervo. So mighty are their houses that they consist of a miserable hut and a fence each. One day, Kullervo's wife gives birth to a son, Kullervo, a strong boy which Kullervo believes will be crowned the king of Karelia, with Karelia depicted as a handful of houses, swamps, and one horse. This creates some brotherly tension, which Untamo ultimately solves by murdering Kullervo and his family, sparing only the little Kullervo and failing to murder his sister, who manages to hide. Untamo then goes on to raise Kullervo as his own son, omitting Kullervo's true identity from the lad. Completely against Lönnrot's key themes in Kullervo's story, Untamo then raises Kullervo with love and care. In Kalevala, the poor boy is abused and mistreated to the point of several murder attempts, but tough as he is, he just won't die. This cycle of abuse and neglect sets him up for one tragic failure after another, and the story almost reads like a fable, with the moral lesson of the importance of raising children properly. In the story written by Antti J, Jokinen and Jorma Tommila, however, Untamo is a firm but caring stepdad. Despite the implied examples and care, Kullervo constantly fails at absolutely everything, coming across as comically stupid. He reacts to his failures by whining, moaning, crying, and raging in a way that truly makes one wonder how the viewer is supposed to sympathize with the character. Later on, Kullervo achieves some success for the first time as he forges a sword while serving the blacksmith Ilmarinen. The sword is supposed to be a fine piece of work, but the viewer can't possibly tell as it appears cast or 3D printed from the same mold as any other ridiculous, oversized sword in the movie. And a far too common response to criticism of props and costumes in fantasy productions goes, "What does it matter? It's fantasy." This argument is so lazy, but I'll address it quickly. Imagine if Lord of the Rings featured cheap, generic costumes instead of hundreds and hundreds of expertly handcrafted items with great attention to detail. Would the films have delivered the same impact? And speaking of swords, the weapons in this movie are especially disappointing, as we have countless surviving examples from the late Iron Age in museums and, for example, Mikko Moilanen's research on the subject. I can't possibly understand why they decided to draw almost no inspiration from archaeology, but instead went for a Temu Vikings look. Seriously, if you search for Viking clothes in the cesspit called Temu, you pretty much get the costumes from Kalevala, Kullervo's story. I will also give a dishonorable mention to whatever this Russian black metal dude is supposed to be wielding. Moreover, there is a wonderful community of experts and hobbyists focusing on textiles and other crafts from the period, who most likely would have been very happy to work or consult on this production. The way they chose instead doesn't stand out from any other Vikings copies that have spawned like mushrooms after rain for the past decade, giving us Vikings Kalevala. Here's a little reimagining of a shot from the movie where I've kept it within the boundaries of mythical fantasy, not trying to accurately depict the place or time, but heavily inspired by what is known about Iron Age material culture in the north of Europe. Uselessly buckled black leather has been switched for wool, and Untamo's huscarls have been given helmets, proper swords, mail, and shields. And here's a similar reimagining of Kullervo's costume. I would argue that my suggestions would not have been more expensive, as all the pieces can be bought and easily modified. And I assume that the film's Temu Ragnar outfits were handmade, sad as they look. Talking a bit more about budget, the film cost some 5 million euros, which puts it easily in the more expensive end of Finnish productions. It is presumably for this reason that the world of the movie seems so underwhelming, as I mentioned earlier. While constructing entire villages might have been unaffordable, what they absolutely could have done is have some establishing shots of Untamolla with digitally added buildings, as is done in virtually any other movie or series, to give a sense of space and geography. Moreover, the mighty Russian army apparently consists of the aforementioned black metal dude and 2 other warriors plus 1 priest. The mighty village of Untamolla consists of a few dudes, 1 woman, child, and a horse. Their houses are scattered in the woods for no apparent reason. The film shows them struggling to feed themselves in the winter, which is no wonder as no farmland is shown anywhere. Slash and burn farming is, however, mentioned once, following the key storytelling principle of tell, don't show. Much of this probably came down to costs again, but how is it that almost any other production has been able to use extras, even when shot somewhere in the woods like many Finnish war films cheaper than this, for example? And I am certainly biased with this opinion, but the world could and should have been brought to life beyond the 3 dudes and a horse by utilizing historical reenactors as extras. Thankfully, the film takes a turn for the better towards the end and manages to bring up some emotion. In particular, when Kullervo meets a nice young lady with whom he develops a close bond. Of course, those familiar with Kalevala or certain Greek tragedies will know how that goes for Kullervo. But this evokes another point of criticism. In Kullervo's story in Kalevala, or its Middle-earth version, these events have immediate, ultimate consequences, whereas in Antti J. Jokinen's version, it just adds another reason for Kullervo to moan, but he doesn't seem any more shaken than when he failed to build a fence earlier. It also makes the final resolution a little artificial and certainly watered down compared to Lönnrot's tragedy. I do understand what they were going for with it, and it probably could have worked in its own story. And therein lies my main issue with Kalevala, Kullervo's story. It is very far from a faithful adaptation of Lönnrot's Kalevala, which it of course doesn't have to be. But with such a title, I, as a Kalevala enjoyer, could not appreciate the film's creative decisions and fundamental misunderstanding of the key theme in Kullervo's story. The film might very well work for someone unfamiliar with the source material and with no idea or attachment to period costumes and world building. These things aside, it looks and sounds very good, with Rauno Ronkainen's cinematography and Lauri Porras' music, with an amorphous song reserved for the end credits. The landscape shots, shot in Finland and Lithuania, I believe, look particularly pleasing, and I wouldn't mind more of them in the film. The visual effects were also great, especially since I didn't notice any, but I assume that flames were beefed up and modern stuff removed from backgrounds and such. For a better Kalevala film adaptation, I don't have a lot of recommendations. This channel, of course, has several videos about Kalevala, including animated stories, and one about Kullervo coming soon. Well, it might be a bit selfish to advertise after criticizing another piece, but it is called YouTube after all. And yeah, all that usual stuff about the cardiologist and such.